right, Nanga Hutsatsekesti. All right, Maulika live stream. Again, Maulika. Right, Nanga Hutsatsekesti. All right. Right, Biba. All right. Half a day Hamzu todo sestigi on otro episode Fanachu. This is another episode of Fanachu. Guåhan host Midzu Talo si Michael Luhan Bavakwa. And lo gof magov junaisa estino mes, and this month we represent, or we celebrate Juneteenth. We also celebrate Pride. And so I'm very I received a lot of feedback last year on Fanachu that there needed to be more Famalawan voices and more queer voices on Fanachu. And I have tried, and this year I'm trying my best to feature more of those. And so remember that Fanachu is a space that basically gets decided by whoever agrees to come on. So if you are Famalawan and you want a space to talk, if you are queer and you want a space to talk, just reach out to me, because literally Fanachu's schedule is basically, I run into somebody and I say, hey, you want to be on Fanachu? Because I want to have a conversation with you and I want to learn from you. And so, and speaking of which, I am so happy. One of the people who I have learned so much from in terms of queer arts, queer culture, sort of even just sort of activism here on Guam is, of course, si Monaeka Flores. I'm so thankful that she agreed to come on for today's episode, as we're talking about queer issues, we're talking about activism, we're talking about decolonization and culture. We have so many things that we can talk about. And so Monaeka, si Dusmasi hu agredesinay nagagyaw gwini.
Hagumash, Salu, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you. And we've been friends for over 20 years now. And I think about us meeting, I think we were like 19 years old, and here we are, you know, and I think of some of our first work together. We protested together at UOG when there was a threat to cut the art program. And I just want to tell everyone this story real quick, because we were making signs and we were splattering red paint, don't kill the arts, and you've ended up covering all your skin, your clothes with the red paint. And it was quite a scene when we showed up at that presentation at UOG. So it's just a great memory of you and all the ways we've been fun and radical, and you know, and queerness is fun and radical as well. And so thank you so much for having me.
Hagumas. And so thank you so much. And so you know, let's get, so if you've so for those watching and listening, you know, Monaeka has been on Fanachu many times before, because we work together through Independent Guåhan. We work together in so many other groups. And so so I'm glad that she is here though with us today, so that we can really talk about, you know, I wanted to ask first off, let's talk about the connections between Chamorro culture and queerness, and some of the Chamorro words sort of that we can use as we're reflecting it's Pride Month, LGBTQ plus. So what are the words that we can use?
Right. No, this is something I think about all the time. What are the Indigenous words for queerness? And all the, you know, queerness is so broad and beautiful and diverse. And if we look at a lot of other Native cultures, there are so many amazing words to describe all the different variations of queerness, all the different names for queerness, you know, gay, lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, you know, there's a lot of words. There's beautiful words like just really that go beyond the limitation of the binary, which is man and woman, even to encompass both genders, all genders, the spectrum of gender, because man and woman, that binary is so limited for identity. And so yeah, what are our words? And it is really hard. And a lot of the words, if we look at, I feel like are, some of them are from our colonial history, our colonial experience. And so you and I were talking, and Gela is one word that comes to mind. Gela, you know, was used, of course, to describe like a feminine man, and it can be or gay person, and it was used in a derogatory way, in a mean way, but it's been reclaimed really by Gumagela, as this beautiful way of it reclaiming and indigenizing, being proud of Indigenous queerness, right? And so Gumagela, of course, is an amazing group, a creative collective, Indigenous creative Chamorro collective, which started in the diaspora actually, and out of a lot of folks in Washington State. And at the beginning of the pandemic, they had a call for a zine, which was so far reaching. And I'll get into a little bit of that later, but Gela is one word. And then another one is Manflorita, which is also a mean word, can be described, has been described used to describe like maybe a trans person or non-binary person, maybe somebody who identifies as a trans woman. And so it has been used to hurt people as well. I've heard the word Guy Palawan for a queer woman or a lesbian. Are you familiar with that word, Maget?
Again, or could be Guy Palawan or Gat Palawan. Gat Palawan. So with the Gat in front of it, it means you like that. Like Gat Palawan, like Gat Lahi is like you like men. Gat Palawan, you like women.
Right. And I mean, and that seems pretty straightforward. Like that person likes women, right? But I just wonder what some of the Indigenous words were, the sacred words around our queerness that may have been lost because of, our colonial history through over 300 years of violent missionization and of course the American patriarchy as well, and militarization, right? Like, what are the words? And of course, the Catholic Church has really influenced that. And, even if we look at institutional issues like the DSM, which at one time categorized, homosexuality as mental illness, or even, different laws, public laws, which prevented folks from, dressing in their gender, to affirm their gender, which, would be, in those days called like masquerading or cross-dressing. I'm really interested in looking into even some of the colonial policies that might have directly or indirectly impacted gender expression and Indigenous queerness, and knowledge and awareness of it. Of course, one of the things that really impacts that knowledge and language even is visibility. And visibility has been such an issue for queer folks everywhere, Indigenous queer folks and folks of color, but definitely here. I always searched for queer elders, and in my family, there are very few. So I think now it's so important also to acknowledge our queer elders, and I don't know, maybe we could just take a minute to acknowledge some of those folks, especially the folks in the center of the movement. First, I think about Chris Perez Howard, of course, with OPIR and all the amazing work he did in that organization to really help shift public consciousness and awareness of decolonization, and even the international modes for that with the United Nations. And then even BJ Cruz, former Senator and Judge BJ Cruz, who also did amazing work for decolonization and with OPIR. And then, I think of there's a lot of other elders who we don't hear about, we don't know about. And something that I started thinking about just very recently was how our queer elders were also criminalized, maybe incarcerated, put into youth correctional facilities, especially if their parents, at that time, if their understanding was that maybe their child had a condition or was breaking a law. I think that's something that we don't hear enough about, but happened. It happened to a lot of our elders, But just to backtrack a little bit, thinking about, folks like Chris Perez Howard and BJ Cruz, I was with Auntie Hope one evening as she was preparing her remarks for her nomination on the Nobel Peace Prize, and she was talking about how in those days it wasn't an issue, that everybody respected each other, worked well together, that queerness was never an issue. And we talked about the language, how also there's like gender neutral words like Saina, Setlu, Asagwao, which are not limited by binary, right? And we talked about how queerness is at the center of the movement for decolonization. And I was very happy to hear that those thoughts made her remarks at the end, where she acknowledged, in that public arena, in an international arena, dedicated to peace, that queerness is at the center of our movement here as well.
Again, no, you've brought out so many things for us to think about and consider. I mean, I think one of the, just even the ways in which we've seen queer artists and queer activists sort of take control of the words that were once used to hurt them, sort of to minimize and marginalize them and then celebrate them. And so, it's beautiful to hear that. But then I love the discussion and about sort of what was Chamorro sexuality, gender identity, what were these things like prior to colonization? Because I think what's always interesting to me is when people sort of celebrate sort of the ancient Chamorro past, but do so only in like this very masculine warrior chief way, or like the sort of the chamarita, the superficial sort of beautiful island girl way. And that's how they think about it. But they don't think about, well, what was it actually like if you had a culture in which gender was not as pronounced? So like you said, Saina, Tsetlu, Potgun. So gender is not the way in which you divide and categorize people as the primary way, but gender still exists, right? It still exists, but it's not the rigid way that sort of we've come to accept it, or that the church and other forces like to promote. It's just so fascinating to think, well, what was it like then at that time? If, you didn't call brother, sister, mother, and father. Instead, everyone was your Tsetlu, and everyone was your Saina and your Potgun. And then later their gender came in, but to prioritize their relationship to you first and then their gender. It's so cool to think about. It's just so cool to think about.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah. And one reason that I want to bring this up though is because like when you think about just the Magalahi as like the strong buff warrior, right? And that's our past. Well, that's just sort of like that's decolonizing, but staying in the colonizer's gaze. So basically, yeah. And so that's why I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because, I work at the Guam Museum, and one of the things that always bugs me is the two statues that are in front of the museum. It's just the two buff dudes. And at a minimum, it should have been maybe one guy and then one woman, or maybe an elder and then a child, or maybe a buff dude, but he's got a belly. Maybe a buff dude, but he's Zanya Benado, well, if it's ancient, Zanya Todo, he likes the Sunni, he likes the Lemai. But imagine if that, and it's more real, it's not idealized. But anyways, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Because you're an artist, you're an artist and an activist. And so part of what artists do is you have to help people connect to these issues in a visual way, in a more visceral way. So I wanted to sort of ask your ideas on, so if we think back into the past, like what would gender have been like, or what would these relationships have been like back then in your idea, in your mind?
Well, that definitely goes to the visibility that I was speaking of earlier, and you're right. I mean, anytime someone kind of talks about what Chamorro women look like, or a depiction of a Chamorro woman for any project, one of the first things you'll see is like a woman with long hair and a flower in her hair. And it's an image we see over and over and over again. And I was with my partner the other day, and she was like, when are we going to see something else? When are we going to see other depictions of Chamorro women and Chamorro non-binary people? I'm not saying that that's not beautiful. It's very beautiful, but yeah, where is the visibility, right, of our queer elders? And I'm really proud that in a lot of ways, the work that we do organically also makes our queer elders a little bit more visible or acknowledged, but definitely not enough. I think that queer folks experience erasure every single day. I experience it all the time. And sometimes, a lot of times it's unintentional from our own friends and family in the community, but sometimes it's definitely directed and intentional. The erasure, you know, and I mean, it could be as one thing, like someone taking an idea and co-opting it, or it could be something like just not acknowledging people, or, I mean, the depiction is a big thing. The depiction is a big thing. And just an interesting side note, the statue of Chief Kukui I heard was modeled, the torso was modeled after BJ Cruz. So that's 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 an interesting side note. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But yeah, the super buff macho warrior and then the feminine maiden, right, are these two sorts of tropes we constantly seem to see presented, right? And then even when you look at mass media, queer representation is so limited, and it's something that if you are a queer person, you're starving for, you're constantly looking for, you know, films with queer Native people, with queer people of color, with people who are not rich. And you find there's horrible tropes of queerness being depicted, you know, like a lot of people who are queer in movies or TV shows, they're often, you know, associated with something violent or problematic, like they are stalking somebody or obsessed with somebody, or, you know, or they struggle with depression, and or the love story ends tragically, or they're hiding and pretending to be straight. There's all these bad tropes. And I also feel like I for some reason, I kind of also want to jump to this need to practice heteronormativity, compulsive heteronormativity, where, you know, because it's a mode of survivorship as well, or, you know, where sometimes queer folks don't even realize they're doing it, where they have to be with a partner who identifies of the opposite sex to be accepted by their family, to be assigned value, to be acknowledged and to be seen. And sometimes even having children makes you seem more whole to people. So that's another thing that queer tomorrows have to kind of always contend with and unpack, is like, you know, what are the ways that people assign more value to you? Of course, is having children. So sometimes it's almost like if you're a queer person without children yet, you might have several godchildren, you might have several people you're parenting, but until you have children of your own, right? You sometimes aren't looked at as a full adult, you know, and that's something that's problematic. You know, that also goes toward your silencing or your erasure. Like maybe a queer woman is less, who's not a mother, is less of a woman than a heterosexual, heteronormative, cisgendered woman. And so there's so many things that we could just go on and on, but I wish I could see more queer elders represented, for sure. I mean, I think it's wonderful. We've got, you know, Chris Perez Howard and BJ Cruz, but I also think of people like Auntie Nevis Materney, who has been in the movement, has done some work behind the scenes, has testified, you know, she is an amazing activist, and we don't really hear much about her. Sometimes issues of gender, class, and economic status or education also impact the visibility as well. So there's almost like all these colonial intersections also impacting queer visibility as well, you know, or intersections with colonialism impacting Indigenous queerness.
Definitely. And so we actually have some comments. And so Peter Santos, who's a frequent guest on Fanachu, and you know, he says we have to be careful not to look at the past with a present lens or a present mindset. This is called presentism. He says that if there was widespread homosexuality in ancient society, surely the term would have been kept and the explorers would have written about it. He says it is quite possible that homosexuality is a more recent occurrence in Chamorro society. And I think, so I would definitely disagree with that characterization of history. So we do always want to be careful that we don't put in our assumptions about the past into the way we see the past. There's ways we can't help it, but at the same time, we can try to get as close to an image as possible using what we know. And what we do know is that the Spanish priests were greatly offended at the female empowerment at the time. We do know that sort of the Spanish hated the fact that women had control over the family space. They were in charge of the house. And for the Spanish, of course, for them, that the man has to be in charge of the house, and that's the way God wanted it, blah, blah, blah. But we also know that women had control over their bodies, and that a man was not allowed to tell a woman who she could be with. So we know that the priests were obsessed with the female empowerment. But the question, though, is we also know that there was male and female divided spaces. And historically, that often leads to homosexual or sort of a lot of diversity in gender identification and sexuality because of those spaces. And if you read the accounts about the Guma Ulitao, there's some which basically infer homosexual relationships. It doesn't, the priest didn't write a lot about it, but there is one section, for example, which says that, basically that the men practice songs on each other before they go to sing them out in public for the girls that they like. And we know that the Ulitao is a sexual space too. And so it's very possible that there was experimentation with young men. And for us, people today may not want to hear something like that, but if that's in the history, then don't judge the past then with the way you feel today either. that the values at that time were much more open possibly about these sorts of things. And so Monaeka, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, no, thank you so much for touching on all that history. The Guma Ulitao definitely had some homoerotic action happening, and so did the Gumalawan, I imagine. And you're absolutely right. The Spanish missionaries, refused to write down the names of the women who ruled the clans, the chiefs, and so that definitely lends to those stereotypes that we were talking to, right? Where Chamorro men are these macho warrior chiefs, right? And the women are these sort of passive maidens. Actually, that's not accurate at all. That's probably, you're right. That's probably where the first erasure of queerness and Indigenous women happens. I mean, I think it was Fray Juan Pobre, who wrote, I was in a class with Robert Underwood and David Atienza, I think, and we read this passage where Fray Juan Pobre was like, there were no unnatural behaviors. And I was like, what does that even mean? And Robert Underwood was like, homosexuality, and I was like, well, that just can't be true. That's absolutely not true. And he laughed and he agreed. I mean, queerness has been around since the dawn of time, and it's not a new phenomenon for Indigenous people or for Chamorro people, and it's dangerous to theorize that that's the case. That's actually part of the thought that's quite dangerous across the world. It kind of also sort of supports some of the homophobic legislation, the anti-LGBTQ violence that has been taking place, and even going, if we want to look at it in a local lens, like banning trans kids from playing sports. I mean, all of those things are connected, and those things are also connected, to larger issues as well of racism, white supremacy, colonization, and even reproductive rights. In the past couple of years, we've just really seen a rise in anti-LGBTQ legislation and anti-trans, really targeting trans kids and queer folks. And we've also seen a lot more attacks on queer folks. It's all connected. All of this violence is connected, really. Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And then, of course, so I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of, all of I'm thinking of police brutality. I'm thinking of all the ways that these things are connected. And even Pride itself, started as a riot, started as a protest, in New York at Stonewall, and those by trans women of color, so we really need to think that Pride, even the celebration of Pride, which can take many directions, right? It started with that. active resistance. And so, yeah, we can go on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what would you like
No,
to?
Again, I think it's important because one thing that we find is that there's drives in societies to come together and rise above, but there's also drives to divide, to marginalize, right? That, if you are an elected if you want to be a leader of a society, you can try to find ways to get people to come together, but an easier way is often to tell them who's bad and who's evil, whether they deserve it or not. And what we've seen across human history is that those who are, queer, trans, who have alternative sexualities from whatever is supposed to be the norm, that they are easy prey for people to say that they are the thing that's bad right now. Don't look over here at what I'm doing over here. Look at all those people that want to play sports when they shouldn't be playing sports. Look at all these people who want to use bathrooms where they shouldn't be using the bathroom. And even if people feel very strongly about those issues, though, they are part of this history of scapegoating, finding an issue which people respond to very strongly. They may not think a lot about clearly, but they just have strong feelings, and then just push it out to them. And then sort of that keeps them from thinking about whether you're stealing money from their pockets over here, whether you're destroying the environment over there, whether you're selling off everything over here to Amazon and Jeff Bezos. But as long as you have stopped somebody from using the wrong bathroom, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Yeah, it's really horrible. Oh God, I could just thinking of the fear mongering that takes place, and like you said, using fear and hate of a group of people to stir these very dangerous extremist views of society, which have led to violence. All kinds of horrible violence. If we look at the shootings that have occurred, in the last several years, if we've looked at the mass shootings, rather, if we look at these brutal attacks on people walking down the street throughout the states, here we're not sure really what the situation is. I mean, I think that a lot of people want to believe that moral values are, sort of grounded in Malik and care and respect. But the truth is, homophobia does exist here. And, we need to look and see where it exists, and homophobia and transphobia, and ask ourselves as a community and even as a culture, what we can do to ensure that especially children are safe. I think when I grew up in Guam in the 80s and the 90s, it wasn't safe to come out. It was very dangerous. And like I said, if we look at the historic criminalization of queer folks, and the historic marginalization of queer folks, it helps to embolden people to continue to be violent today, using those justifications from the past of, mental illness or, those things, or like, laws that police people's bodies, police how people dress, right? Those are the same things that sort of empower homophobic behavior today. And so yeah, where were we going with that?
No, thank you. You're getting lots of support from people watching. People, Lacia Casil is watching, Amber Benavente, Sonia Agan watching. You're getting a lot of support from people, and I like the way that you're reminding us that sort of we have elders, right, who have this existence, because it's too often, as Peter was suggesting earlier, some people who are resistant say, well, this is just a new thing. This is not really deep in our culture. This is not who we are. But then a lot of the assumptions that people have that are homophobic, or that, a lot of those are recent too. They're very recent in our culture too. And I always try to remind people that one of the things that differentiated Chamorros from the Spanish was tolerance. Now, this didn't mean that sort of, Chamorros were like an everyday Pride Day parade or something like that. But they were much more tolerant than the Spanish. So for example, the Spanish said, if you've got leprosy, you must be quarantined, you have to go away. But Chamorros, wanted to keep their family members close. Even when the Navy came in, took the Chamorros, put them in IPAO, some of whom were lepers, some of whom just had skin diseases. Chamorros, for a decade, broke their family members out to take them back home so they could take care of them. Now, some of these family members had lost limbs because of the leprosy. They didn't look normal. They had a terrible affliction, but for Chamorros, tolerance and support was the main factor, the main motivation. We have to take care of them. So the capacity to care, the capacity to be tolerant, to love is strong, but it's also mixed in with all these other things, which tell us to hate, to put down, to tease, to divide. But for me, I always try to just put out in the history to remind people that actually our people, have great capacity to be tolerant and to care and to love. So let's highlight those things. Let's not sort of fixate on sort of what the church tells us now or what our conception of culture is now. Let's look at how we have been in history.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that we don't, have enough, documentation or record of. And this is what we can do now. We can go and talk to our queer elders. We can interview them. We should find out, we should ask them questions. We should hear their stories, and we should, try to protect and archive them for future generations. It's definitely something I needed as a young person, and looking for queer Chamorro heroes, and I think a lot of folks eventually have to become sort of their own elder hero if they don't find somebody in their family or in their community, and then hopefully you can become that person for young folks coming up. But I think right now we've got a lot of amazing activists and people in the community who are those, elders and heroes and heroes in the making. And you mentioned Lacia, and I was going to mention Lacia too. And I mentioned earlier, Chris Perez Howard and BJ Cruz, but and Antti Neves attorney, right? And then of course, we've got Julian Uggen, attorney Julian Uggen, also at the center of the movement, doing such incredible work for all of us. It's not. I just feel like there's a few things I got to pause and say is, one, we're queer Indigenous Chamorro queer people, LGBTQ people are sacred, and we're miracles, and we have survived so much, and we should pause and celebrate, and we should pause and honor all of us, but yes, we're really in a place where we can think about who those are. I also want to mention Malia Ramirez, who is the historian at the Guam Historic Preservation Office, and has been doing a lot of different things in the community, performing artwork. In fact, Malia, as well as Crimsonia Kaiser, another queer activist, a queer Filipina trans activist here, has done amazing things. And you can see both of their art pieces right now at the new Kaha Gallery, for this month's Pride Month exhibit. It's important that our folks see these queer elders, and then we've got Lacia, who's, founded ISA LGBTQ several years ago, and they raise money for scholarships for LGBTQ students at the university, at UOG and at GCC. And also a founding member of Save Southern Guam. And then, folks like, Senator Sabina Perez, who's doing a lot of amazing environmental work as well. We've got a lot of folks doing all the work. And then I do want to shout out to my Chelu, Amber Beneventi, who with her partner, Carrie, they're parenting 4 amazing kids. And Amber has been, a teacher, she's been a chanter, and she's been an amazing activist. And if I could just share screen, I'll share I just want to share a picture of those guys right now. This is Amber and Carrie. just kind of want to do a little shout out to them. And, you know, this is Amber's their oldest, who just graduated from high school, and all this is their beautiful family. And of course, Amber's, you know, one of the daughters of Mama Jill and Uncle Ed. So, I mean, really also coming from a family who's been involved in the work, the movement for so long. So yeah, I just kind of want to shout them out, you know, shout out all the queer parents out there and all the parents of queer children who are, you know, like yourself, Maged, who are, you know, doing an amazing radical work for radical love and radical honesty and everything, radical care for your family. And, you know, and then there's a lot of other folks doing, I definitely can't name everybody, and I don't mean to forget anybody, you know. I have to also mention, I really want to mention the House of Diosa, who's this amazing performance community who really, you know, have done a lot to support trans women here in Guam, starting with the performances. And you can see them every week this month at Icon, doing these amazing pride shows. I'm trying to pull up their Instagram, but I'll find it in a second. But
no problem. Go ahead and
here we go.
Go ahead and take a moment and look, and I'll take over, because while you're looking for it.
Okay.
And so, but thank you so much for bringing this up. I mean, I think yeah, I think for a lot of people, the changes that we see, like, people feel sort of like weirded out by all of the pride stuff. But the thing is, it's always been there. It's just that people haven't, as you mentioned, felt safe. That if you spoke about it, I mean, so thinking about sort of queer, you know, queer elders, I remember that when I was first learning to speak Chamorro and I was doing a lot of oral history interviews, you know, I looked in the Topping dictionary and I saw that there's the word like Gela, Manflorita, and there's words like that. But then I was like, is there a word for like lesbian? And I asked my, you know, grandmother, and my grandma was like, I don't know, you know, I don't know, I don't think so. And then I was like, is there a word for bisexual? And my grandma was like, and it feels very weird now that I was asking my grandmother how to say those words, but, you know, I wanted to know. And then as I asked elders who I was interviewing, so many of them had the response saying there was nothing like that before. There was no one like that before. And I would always wonder, I would be like, that can't be true. That can't be the case. And so sometimes if I had a moment, then I would ask them, no one was like that in your family. And actually, almost everybody had people who were gay or lesbian in their families at that time. And they would mention sort of, for example, the biggest one that might be mentioned is sort of an uncle who helped with the women, and whatever the women were doing, that uncle would work with them and follow them, you know, and that uncle might even wear a mestiza and might even dress sort of the way that the women did. And that when they would divide up into Tamarita, sort of throwing songs back and forth, that uncle would line up with the women and then throw songs at the men. And so, and then people would say that there was women who also refused to marry. Women who refused to marry, they would say there was women who would live together and never marry. And so, but then when I would, you know, and I would ask people, I'd say, but there was nothing like, you know, there was, and then I would challenge and say, really, there was no word for what these people were used to describe them. And so, I mean, I would always feel bad. And I remember talking to one old woman who was talking about two of her aunts who lived together. And then, you know, when she made the connection, you know, that they were likely lesbians, then, you know, but she felt bad. And I remember her crying because everyone just, that all of the things that she felt, marrying somebody, having a family, no one supported her aunts who may have wanted those things, who may have wanted a full life. And so that's why, you know, whenever people say, oh, you know, it didn't exist before, it wasn't there, it was always there. People, you know, but the thing is that for whatever reason, the culture didn't support people. As Monaeka mentioned, it silenced people and made them invisible, or it made them feel invisible, even if it publicly, you know, even if it was, there was some acceptance of them, they may not be able to even speak what they are to people. That was something that was something that I definitely noticed. And so, Monaeka, were you able to find the information?
Yeah, actually, I did. I found a picture of Trinity, who is who's right now. Sorry, I did find something. Just a second. Well, anyway, before I get back on that, I also just thought about Patrick Palomo. You know, another great, amazing elder. I'm just very grateful. When I grew up, I was the only person in my family who I knew of at the time. And then there was only one uncle who I saw who I knew was gay. And I didn't really have a lot of classmates. I did know I was different from a very young age. And I did seek out other, classmates and friends, but it was hard. It was hard finding friends. And oftentimes, some folks weren't ready to be out. And so sometimes there was that risk as well, risk by association, but here I did want to share this one picture from one of the recent shows from the Untouchables. It's just gorgeous. The work that they're doing, the work that they do year round, not just during Pride. And Kelly Diosa, the founder, is an amazing activist in her own right. And I just wanted to share this picture of them. Earlier, I mentioned Guåhan, and I kind of want to talk about them real quick because they are doing amazing things. And like I said last year, in 2000, they did a call for Guåhan and Puspus. Am I saying that right? Miguel, please correct me. What is the right way to say this word?
Yeah, Maulik Puspus.
Okay, great. And so they did this call for this zine about Chamorro queer love and sex. And the results were pretty far-reaching. This was one of the first projects that really helped to connect queer Chamorro creatives here at home and in the diaspora. And finally, there was a community of queer Chamorro artists and performers and writers. And actually, Miguel, I really got to make sure I get you a copy of this. But Miguel was selling it has been selling them as a fundraiser. And I think they're on a sliding scale from $25 to $35 donations, but they're pretty amazing. And the range of artwork. So I was really excited to be a part of this project. And when they hosted their own webinar for a bunch of the artists to attend and meet each other and speak to each other. And I have to say, and Patrick Palomo came to that event, and seeing a queer elder with all of these beautiful queer Chamorro people was so overwhelming. I just cried. And I do want to show, Guåhan has done so much amazing work. This is a series of pieces about our indigenous birds, that we've lost because of invasive species. And it says here, we often see the story of Guåhan's birds as one of lost in days gone by. It's a frame that we often use for when we share the story of our island, our culture, and our people. They are all connected after all, yet there are moments worth celebrating, like the Coco's return. Decolonization, re-indigenizing, reclamation, and sovereignty are really big words that almost seem unattainable, but sometimes it's simply a space created and feeling felt when you get to celebrate all the parts of you with others. And so this is just such a beautiful post and beautiful image. The artistry is incredible. And yeah, visibility, reclaiming these spaces, celebrating our queerness is part of our process for decolonization and sovereignty, right? So I wanted to share that. And then, I also wanted to shout out another Chetlu, Dakota Komatsu, who has done the Mali'i project and has done, all kinds of different work. Performance, and also celebrating and centering Indigenous, queer, and non-binary folks in their work, I should say. Here's a picture of Dakota. And yeah, this is a picture of a performance Dakota just did a couple of months ago with two of our amazing friends, Lourdes and Rowdy, and who are also members of Guåhan. And they'll be coming home. They'll all be coming home in July. So we'll get to see all these amazing folks. And, you know, I also want to mention Lehua, who is an amazing writer, has published several collections of books, and of course our Julian again as well. You know, there's so much beautiful Chamorro queerness to celebrate and to honor, and you know, we just have to think about, you know, the ways that, you know, there's people listening out there, and they're probably hearing some of these names and thinking, oh, I didn't know this, or I didn't know that, and you know, I hope that people think about these names and these people with love and grace and respect, and not, you know, think of it as another thing to further marginalize or harm people for and with. That's something, you know, I mean, I think that I wasn't out for a while. I mean, people figured it out about me. It's not easy to hide queerness. I will admit, though, that I did dabble in compulsive heteronormativity. In fact, yeah, that's probably about the time we met in college. But you know, I tried to pass as a heteronormative person, and it was very self-destructive. Actually, I made myself really unhealthy, kind of like, you know, what happens when you deprive freedom and liberation from a people, you know, for hundreds of years. You see how it manifests in all kinds of health issues and all kinds of human health and environmental health issues, right? And it's again, I can't stress enough how these things are so interconnected, and artwork is really one way to get people open. And I just want to share this one other picture. So like in 2016, I curate the first Pride exhibit at Guåhan Shopping Center. I was actually a member of Lasia's group, ISA LGBTQ, and me and my friend Julius Sotomayor, we installed the first Pride exhibit, and it was amazing. And you know, we did it all. It was all volunteer, and it was a lot of work, and we didn't have the capacity to make it an annual thing yet. And then just last year, I helped Gumagela install that another Pride exhibit at SKC at Second Couture in Samoro, and that was the first Pride celebration at SKC, and something that Amber was involved with as well. And we're all really proud and grateful for that. And then so now this is like the second Pride Month exhibit. And Lasia had reached out to me and Julius to see if we could help. And, you know, it's resulted, there was a public call for work, and it's resulted in this really great exhibit in the new Guåhan Gallery, which is at the GCIC building. So we encourage everybody to check that out. In fact, there's an open mic on Friday, and we're going to hear from some amazing queer writers, chanters, and performers. Dakota will be there. Eddie Ekfadzi will be reading, and several other folks. And it's open mic. So if there's anyone out there listening and they want to come by and share a song or a poem, or please feel free. It's 6 to 8, and the gallery is on the second floor of the GCIC building. Sorry, wrong building, not the GCIC building. Sorry. The DNA building. So sorry. Let me correct
the
myself.
old PDN building now.
Old PDN building, known as the DNA building. So the second floor of the DNA building. This is the building near the library. You just go in the elevator, the second floor, and then when you get out of the elevator, it's to the left. And so I just wanted to show this other picture here. This is at the Pride exhibit. My friend Aiko took this picture, but it's me and my partner Stacy, and Stacy's got 3 beautiful paintings in the Pride exhibit, her first exhibit here at home, and I'm really excited she's a part of it. And then right behind Aiko and Stacey, you can see this beautiful textile by our friend Joey Certeza, an amazing activist, artist, community organizer. I love Joey so much. I kind of wish we got Joey on the show next time. And then next to us is Sol, another amazing queer Indigenous artist and writer, musician. Sol is also featured in the Gumagela zine, as well as this exhibit at Guåhan. And of course, Sol's mom, Nicole Delisle Duenas, who's a member of PLSR with me as well. And so, yeah, that's one picture. And you know, Miguel, you've got some family with some art in the exhibit, and which are amazing pieces as well. So yeah, it's it's a hard time. The world's on fire. Brown and Black bodies are constantly under attack. Our environment our culture is constantly under attack, and we are doing so much work for our sovereignty. And it's important to center joy and rest as well, and to celebrate our resilience as well. So Pride is a good moment to sort of pause and do all that, and also make these connections of how our colonial history and this ongoing violence and pride are all connected. And so pride really does take on a deeper meaning, if we can pause and celebrate the things we've survived and the ways we are thriving. I mean, we are miracles, all of us queer Chamorro folks. We're miracles, we're sacred. We deserve to be safe. We deserve resources. We deserve love. And yeah, it is really important for us to make these connections and to say these things over and over again. Some people might take for granted that Guam is relatively safe. We don't have to say these things, but there are a lot of queer children out there who are experiencing things they shouldn't experience. And there are a lot of people out there who are in need of healing. A lot of parents of queer children who need support, and a lot of queer children who need us all to make sure that they're safe. Yeah. And so I guess,
thank you. Thank you for that, because I think that when for people that are resistant to these sorts of things, a lot of it, for them is discomfort or disbelief. But when you balance it against the safety of people, right, the mental health of people, especially youth, right? So just that idea that, because somebody doesn't like these sorts of things, is that more valuable, their sort of comfort versus sort of the mental health and the safety of somebody, where they may feel pressures to hide who they are, to hurt themselves because they don't feel like there's a place for them in the world. And that's why, we have to remember that sort of the argument that sort of all of these things, sort of that queerness, sort of LGBT people, they're unnatural, it's wrong, it's not normal. Science has shown us that all of these things are normal and natural. So it's not an issue that sort of we need to marginalize and suppress it. We need to help people. We need to make them feel safe. We need to support them so that they don't, as you've said, that they don't get hurt and that they don't feel that they need to hurt themselves. And so that's why, especially in this month set aside, we should remember that, because as you said, the world is on fire, and one of the things is people are burning sports leagues because of transgender athletes, and people are setting the world on fire because of bathroom bills and this and that. And so let us remember the safety of those, of those who need our support, right? That is then, and like you said, you put it so much better than I am. And so I appreciate you putting it out there the way you did.
Also, I just want to remind people the importance of really considering the queer imagination when we want to imagine new futures for ourselves, because as queer folks, we're constantly tested to see ourselves and our environments and our situations in different ways, in ways that other folks are not, that, heteronormative folks might not be tested in the same way, right? We have to think about our safety in different ways. We have to observe our environment in different ways. We have to think about the way we engage with people in very different ways. And so there's a different level of sensitivity in a way, and we also get to reinvent ourselves. Like if this is a painful situation, I will reinvent myself. I can change the way I look. I could, do something else. There's a magic about our queerness, and people know it, and people tap into it time and time again. Sometimes you feel a little tapped out, but the truth is I want to remind everybody that, if we look at all the amazing names we mentioned and all the amazing work that folks have done, over the years, who are Chamorro and are queer and are creative, or, believe in a change and are doing important work for the change. please always keep in mind queer imagination, because it's going to help us remap a whole new future for ourselves. It has been at the center, and it's going to continue to be at the center of the movement. And I gosh, you know what, I have this long list of friends, and I apologize because some of the friends, I probably should have also checked in with them before I just kind of started naming people. But I also, let's see, I wanted to mention Roken as well, another friend who I miss in the diaspora. And gosh, so many other great people here. And one other person, I just want to mention a great artist and activist as well, Fanachu Castro, who is an educator who has impacted a lot of young folks, activated a lot of young folks as well. There's just, I could really go on. There are so many amazing poets and writers and musicians and teachers and caregivers and environmentalists, lawyers who are queer and who are, you know, really, our community is just it's just so much brighter and better because of these folks. And it kind of makes sense to even go back to what you were talking about in the very beginning of this conversation too, Maget, about the binary, right? And how it's a sort of an imposed structure. It really limits, you know, the way people can identify, you know, and express their gender, right? And so I really also want to challenge folks to try to think beyond the binary. There were traditionally and culturally these gendered spaces, as you mentioned before, but there was also traditionally and historically challenges to some of that, right? And also some ways that queerness was erased from those spaces. We can acknowledge that queerness has always been there, whether it was the Guma Ulitao or the Gumalawan, right? And so we, which are gendered spaces, we need to think beyond that binary as well. I often feel that the binary is too strict for me and my identities. I have and do also identify as non-binary, because I think sometimes woman is too limited for how I feel, for all the, you know, and so and a lot of folks can feel like that. And so and it can change too, you know. That's the beauty about a word like non-binary, is that it's not static, it's not restrictive, it's open, and we get to imagine and unpack, and, you know, those boundaries. We don't have to we can look beyond we can look beyond the boundaries of that binary, is what I mean, and imagine a new way of being. And it's so important also that we see people as whole people. I feel like sometimes we walk around, because of capitalism, because of our colonial reality, we often missing the humanity in each other, you know. Like sometimes you'll go to the post office or a bank or a store and people aren't really even seeing each other. It's crazy. It's a little mind-blowing. So we've got to just recognize the sacredness and the humanity in each other too. And so yeah, sorry that I'm a little all over the place, because this is a lot. All of these are so also they're triggering, they're emotional, but also there's so much to talk about, so much information, so much vocabulary, so much and I'm trying to be concise and accessible and interesting. So I hope I'm doing okay.
No, you did, Sidus Masi. You did a wonderful job sort of celebrating sort of the, you know, celebrating the, as you said, sort of the miracle, the beauty. We need to prioritize love. You know, we need to prioritize that in love, not just in a tokenistic sense, but, you know, that sort of, you know, love people in the wholeness of who they are, the binary, right? But what we know is that binaries can simplify things, but there is always violence in that simplification as well. That if you say, there's this side, there's this, and there's this, what usually happens is that, you know, if people don't fit in there, then they're erased. And furthermore, one gets put on top of the other in terms of the binary, and those who don't fit just. And so it's an important thing to remember, to sort of, that as we sort of try to challenge colonialism in our lives, it comes down to even these very issues of sexuality and gender as well, that it's not simply just sort of the desecration of artifacts, of human remains. It's not just the taking of Chamorro lands, but it even goes into sort of things that we might think of as being just very personal, right? This is my personal opinion. No one is telling me this, my personal belief, my values, but these are also things informed by colonial history and so on. And so I definitely appreciate everything that you've shared today. We'll go Fagradesi how. And to everyone who, Dispensa. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just thought if we could just end real quick. I just realized I didn't share any of my artwork.
I was going to ask you about it, but you were, as a very sort of generous person, talking about everyone else. So I didn't want to stop you.
Well, thank you. Thank you
but
so
please
much.
Go ahead.
I'll just end with this. And then this is one thing I made that made the Gumagela zine. It says, "I want to grow with you." And it's actually a card I made my partner. And I was feeling very warm and happy that I made it. So I want to grow with you as a card I made for my partner, a queer Chamorro woman with marker and pain about 2 weeks ago. This is a very new relationship and we've struggled together in our start. This card is meant as an intention set forward for us to heal and grow together and uplift each other to be our best selves. Sometimes it feels like we're lost in the jungle and all we want to do is nurture and sustain our love. And so this is, it's a little piece that I had in the Gumagela zine. You can see other work at the exhibit if you'd like, which will be up for a few more days. And please come to the open mic on Friday. Yeah. And if you have any questions, please call Kaha. I think their number is 300-1206, 300-1206. Yeah.
Biba. Si Zeus Masi, thank you to everyone. Si Zeus Masi no hamsu todos ni umeigad za umeekongok. Thank you for tuning into Fanachu. I do want to remind everybody before I forget that next week will be the General Assembly for Independent Guåhan, June 30, Thursday, 4 to 5:30 p.m. It'll be live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. The focus will be water sovereignty. Members of Protect Guam Water will be talking, and then also we will be honoring the late Senator Pilar Cruz Lujan. And so, all right, Enoha para Pauga. Si Zeus Masi Tatlu, Monaeka pari Finatok mo Pauga. Thanks so much for coming.
Pagumas Salu and Biba Pride.
Biba Hungan ita fambanidoso. Put toru itautaw. Hungan. Adios.